urgente que cette Chambre s'ajourne maintenant. The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And again, a privilege to rise today in this House on the lands of the Algonquin Anishinaabeg people and a deep Miigwech. I'm speaking today as a follow-up to a question that one might think was stale-dated, but it does give us an opportunity to pursue what was a remarkable success in Montreal at the 15th Conference of the Parties of the Biodiversity Convention. It's nice to be able to recognize a success at anything in the stage of a planet on fire, of biodiversity and freefall, and yet when I raised this matter, which was at the end of November, before the conference occurred, where I was asking if the Prime Minister would be able to raise the profile of this event and encourage other world leaders to come, that question is definitely stale-dated. But the results of what happened at COP15, the result which is titled, of course, the Kunming, that's the city in China where this event was supposed to have happened, the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework and the global goals for 2050 are worth taking the time right now, and I'm grateful the Parliamentary Secretary is here for the adjournment discussion. What did we accomplish? I will say publicly, and I haven't had a chance to say it in this place, that the Honourable Minister for Environment did a great job in negotiating and keeping some diplomatic heavy lifting going. This was a convention discussion that was, the cards weren't good. The cards that were dealt on this were pretty bad. The COP15 was supposed to have happened in September 2020. All the delays, all due to COVID. But then the geopolitical cards weren't good either. Here was Canada offering it basically the last minute. June of 2022, we said, okay, to the People's Republic of China. Clearly, you don't have a place to host this right now. Montreal is the host city, the secretariat for the United Nations Convention for the Protection of Biodiversity. So Canada's going to step up and invite everybody here. When I say last minute, 6 months may sound like a lot of time to people, but Madam Speaker, you and I know what it's like. If you suddenly decide you're going to invite 30 friends for dinner and it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon and then they're due at 7. In UN terms, that's what we did. And the dynamic here was very challenging in that the People's Republic of China remained the host in the context of being in charge. They were, in UN terms, the president of the COP, and that meant that our Minister of Environment was, physical host in Montreal. Again, credit to the Minister of Environment that he actually put himself into an interesting position and worked in a very unusual, diplomatic, successful partnership with the Minister of Environment from the People's Republic of China. Now, what did we accomplish there? Well, about the goals are many and they're detailed, and what I want to speak to today, because we have 23 targets and they are detailed. But I'm afraid what we're going to see is the typical response out of Environment Canada of, okay, here we go, 25% by 2025, 30% by 2030, and then it becomes a job of drawing lines on a map. The targets are not about lines on the map, and lines on the map may even do a disservice to the targets of slashing pesticide use, reducing food waste, recognizing Mother Earth and Indigenous sovereignty. These are goals that require far more transformational changes than lines on a map, and if an area is outside that line, it will be decimated. We need to focus and plan.
Well, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank my friend and honourable colleague for her comments, her compliments on the success of COP15, and I will certainly pass those on to the Minister. But, Madam Speaker, this was a success for Canada and indeed the world. And, Madam Speaker, I think the honourable member will agree the hard work begins now in implementing that framework. As was correctly noted, Madam Speaker, China retained the presidency of COP15 while Canada provided the host location. Canada stepped up as the host location, doing in 5 months what normally takes 2 years to do, and sent a strong signal that we understand the urgency of mobilizing the world on this issue, Madam Speaker. China, as the COP15 presidency, was responsible for working with the United Nations Secretariat for the Convention on Biological Diversity to issue invitations to the high-level segment. This was a UN conference, as the honourable member referenced. It was Canada's conference in terms of home field, and formally it was China that invited heads of state and governments to COP15 at their discretion. As a United Nations meeting, COP15 was open to all UN member states. All parties were formally invited to choose their representatives following an official notification from the CBD Secretariat. As the honourable member will know, the Prime Minister delivered remarks at the opening ceremony of the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, COP15, and he highlighted the importance of protecting nature and biodiversity. He was engaged with key stakeholders. His participation on the ground sent a strong message, Madam Speaker, that Canada is engaged and is leading by example in order to push for a clear, ambitious, and transformative post-2020 global biodiversity framework. The high-level segment, which was always planned as a ministerial event, engaged ministers to help conclude negotiations and secure an ambitious outcome, and that is exactly what happened, Madam Speaker. The Minister of Environment and Climate Change served as the head of the Canadian delegation and had a very, very active role in the negotiations and at COP15 generally. In addition, several other cabinet ministers attended COP15 throughout the 2 weeks of negotiations, lending a strong message of Canadian political engagement and leadership. And just wrapping up, Madam Speaker, and again highlighting that the Prime Minister was active at COP15 and Canada's expectations for an ambitious outcome were indeed realized at this landmark event, and we are confident there is now clear recognition that nature is as important, Madam Speaker, as climate, and that the two crises must be tackled together. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Saanich School Finance.
My honourable friend, Parliamentary Secretary. Yes, a lot was accomplished, as I said in my moments, but what I really want to focus on now is what's next. And the question will remain, how do we recognize this language in the targets from Kunming, Montreal are truly transformative. This is the first UN document that has referenced Mother Earth. Our relationship as humanity with Mother Earth, the leadership of Indigenous peoples around the world in an indigenization of our cultural approach, which has forever been, well, at least in industrialized modern society, exploitative, extractive, and violent. This is a call for a transformation of our values, a change in our industrial systems, and a requirement that we do more in how we conduct agriculture, aquaculture, forestry, that we change our ways while we still have time.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Once again, Madam Speaker, I find myself in violent agreement with the honourable member, which is often unusual in this chamber. But and just to re-emphasize that the Government of Canada signalled commitment and resolve in the lead-up to COP15 through a series of statements and announcements centred around our progress towards conserving 30% of our land and waters by 2030, the protection and recovery of species at risk, and partnerships with Indigenous peoples and provincial and territorial governments. And, Madam Speaker, at the international level, leaders from Canada and many other countries underlined the importance of COP15 and the post-2020 global biodiversity framework in recent months, including at the G7, G20, and the UN General Assembly. Thank you, Madam Speaker.